Hi, welcome to another episode of When the Scriptures Become Real. Kind of podcast where we learn, where we study, where we grow. Try to become the best versions of ourselves as we can as we continue to serve our Lord. One quick thing before we get started with our podcast. I've actually kind of revamped the media that I use to put the podcast on social media. So I'm actually setting up new accounts. So look for that soon. So I'm setting up a new Instagram account. I'll set up a new Twitter account. But as of right now, you can find it on LinkedIn, and that's where you can also message me. If you have any questions, just look at my name, Jordan Pugh. You see my picture there and the podcast links. And then also you can find me on Pinterest. And so just search my name, Jordan Pugh, and then the podcast. There's a certain board for When the Scriptures Become Real on Pinterest there too. So you could look those up, and those are both avenues to where you can directly message me and we can talk about the Bible and other things. So we're going to set that other stuff up. So just continue to look out for it. So in today's podcast, what we want to talk about is love always sacrifices. Love always sacrifices. You know, I'm a sucker for a good love story. Right, I remember one time, I think it was I can't remember, maybe middle school or high school, but I just got done playing basketball and I walk in the house, and usually after that I would watch, ESPN to kind of check up on, the sports highlights, or maybe there's a basketball game on or something. So I come into the house, and usually the TV's pretty much free, but I came in and Mom happened to be watching a movie. It was a Hallmark movie, right? So I walk in, and I kind of just hang out there and kind of wait until the movie's over so I can get to the TV. But I didn't expect to sit there and watch the rest of the movie, right? And essentially the movie was kind of about a guy that came back, but then his girl had another dude, and then he kind of had to live life watching his girl with another guy, but he still had feelings for her, and so he kind of was trying to win her back, but trying not to at the same time. And so, I'm always rooting for the underdog guy. I'm always rooting for that dude. And so, I was like, well, I was sitting there watching, all right, what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen? And so by the end of the movie, Mom was like, I can't believe you sat here and watched that whole thing. And, I was sitting there, I'm like, it's pretty good. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was a pretty good movie. So I'm a sat for a good love story, right? And you think about the world's view of what love is. Love that the Bible talks about, and then we'll eventually get to the love that the Lord has. All right. So one of my favorite, love stories in the Bible comes from Genesis chapter 29. So let's go on and turn there. And again, remember with this podcast, guys, we use the Bible for our avenues of study and scripture, and our springboards for our topics and study. And so again, get your phone out, get your Bibles out, tablets out, wherever you can find a Bible. Go on and follow along, because this is where the main springboard comes from what we're talking about. All right. So, okay, Genesis chapter 29. So remember, if you're not familiar with what happens here, just to give you some context here, Jacob is here at his at Laban's house, and Laban has two daughters, Leah and Rachel. And so he pulls out the veil, and it's Leah. It's not the daughter that he wanted. And so he had to marry Leah, but he really wanted Rachel. And so he said Rachel is very beautiful. He loved her, right? But I want you to notice Genesis chapter 29, and let's start in verse number 18. And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to thee than I should give her to another man. Okay, so abide with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, because of the love that he had to her. And so, okay, so people, we kind of gloss over that. But think about, remember, we're talking about what does love do? Love will always sacrifice for the other person. Look at what Jacob was willing to sacrifice to get Rachel. He was willing to give up his time, and he was willing to wait for her. You know, one thing that love always does is love always waits, because it absolutely wants what's best for the other person. But notice here, he waited for 7 years. Can you imagine waiting for something for 7 years? You know, people, we wait for certain things. We wait for phones to come out. We wait for new cars to come out. We wait for new this to come out or new that to come out. And we want it now, right? When something new comes out, think about the new iPhone, right? People wait forever for those things to come out. And then when they come out, you want to grab it really quick, right? But think about what Jacob was willing to do. Not only was he willing to wait, but he was willing to wait for 7 years. 7 years is a long time, if you really think about that. I mean, going through the Memphis School of Preaching for 2 years, those 2 years, some days seem like 15 years. You know, and imagine him waiting and working for 7. But guess what that proved to Rachel? That proved that Jacob really cares about me, because he's willing to work and wait for 7 years for me. And so here's the thing that love has, and this is good for us single people, maybe if you're married, maybe if you're dating, whatever. But this is good to show that what love can do. Love waits, and it waits patiently. But notice he was working while he was waiting, right? So there's a difference there. But then I want you to notice something else about love. What else will love do if you love somebody? Love does what's absolutely best for the other person, even though it may not be with you, or it may be without you for a time. Because look, remember, Jacob served for 7 years, but could he be with her? He couldn't be with her until that 7 years was fulfilled. So guess what he had to do for 7 years? He had to separate. Now, could they see each other? Possibly. Could they talk? Possibly. We don't know. We don't know, right? But the thing we do know is that Jacob couldn't be with her for 7 years. Now, let's really look at this. You know what this shows? This shows, number one, it shows Jacob's faith in God, that he would continue to work and work and work for her, even though he couldn't have her right now. Then number two, it showed Rachel's faith in God, and it showed Rachel's faith in Jacob. Now imagine, ladies, think about this for a second with me. If some guy said, I can't be with you right now, but, give me 7 years and then I'll come back and we can be together. How many of you ladies would wait for the guy for 7 years? Wouldn't you have doubts? Wouldn't you question his love for you? Wouldn't you question if he's really going to come back? Would you question if he fell in love with somebody else? Would you question, did he forget about me? Would you question all that stuff? Possibly you probably will. But notice, this shows Rachel's faith in God, and it showed Rachel's faith in Jacob. That Jacob, even though he wasn't there possibly, but even though they couldn't be together right now, it showed that she had enough faith that he wanted what was absolutely best for her. Right? And that's one attribute that every good relationship needs to have, is that sense of trust. But both parties need to trust God more than they trust each other, even when they're apart. And that's the beautiful thing about the relationship with Jacob and Rachel, is that for 7 years, possibly, let's say if they were apart, they still had enough faith in God and enough faith in each other that at some point it would work. And that point was 7 years, right? So love will always sacrifice and wait. But here's another thing that love will do as well. Love will not be afraid to let go if possible. What are you talking about? Don't you want love to be together? Don't you want everything to work out? Oh, for sure. You want that to happen. But if you do love something, sometimes it may be possible that you might have to let it go. What are you talking about, man? Notice this. Go to Genesis chapter example of like a guy and a girl love story like we just talked about before with Jacob and Rachel. But this is it's now remember all the way in Genesis chapter 12. sacrifice because you love that person. And I don't think a lot of people understand that necessarily, of letting somebody go because you love them. And Abraham was willing to let Isaac go because guess who he loved more than Isaac? He loved God more than Isaac. And he had enough faith that even if I have to kill him, God can raise him back up. Or he can allow me to have another son. He had that much faith and he had that much love for God. You see, and that's a test of true love that you have for another person. Because do you obviously, the person that you care for, don't you want them near you and don't you want them by you all the time? Why wouldn't you, right? But if it ever gets to the point where by that person being with you causes problems, guess what you want? You want them to be happy even if it's not with you. And that's not easy. And notice the phrasing in verse number 1, God did tempt Abraham. This was a test. You know, potentially letting something go, letting a person go can be a test. Potentially, I'm not saying it is all the time, but it can be a test to see how much you love that person. Let something I've waited for so long go, right? And this is how God tested Abraham. Let me see if he really loves me. Something he waited for 25 years, I'll ask him to sacrifice it. He's going to test his love for me, right? And so love will always do what's absolutely best for the other person, even if that's not with you. Now remember, 1 Corinthians 13, if you'll turn there, remember this is the great love chapter. And it lists some things that love is, but it also lists some things that love will not do. And so if you look, somewhere around, verse number 4 says, love or charity suffers long and is kind. It envies not, it vaunts not itself. It's not puffed up. It's not prideful. So if love is not prideful, shouldn't I be willing to let something go so that person can have things better, right? Shouldn't I want to be able to do that? Because, and this is a true test for your own individual love, phileo and agape. This is a test for both as an individual. If you're willing to let that person go so they can succeed and excel past you or be better without you, that shows that you really love that person. Because guess what love will never do? It's not puffed up. So if you're not willing to do that, then that shows what type of love you have. It's selfish. Well, I want it because I want it, or I want it because it's only mine. Love is willing to do whatever it takes so the other party will always succeed past you. So imagine if you have two people that have that type of mindset, that no matter what happens, I will do what's absolutely best for you, even if that means me leaving the picture. Then what if the other party had the same feeling about you or about me? I'm going to do what it takes to make sure that you're always okay. And if I'm ever in your way, I'm going to let you go. And so you have both people with the attitude of, I want what's best for you. And then the other person, I want what's best for you. And that's what love will always do. And notice verse 5, it doesn't behave itself unseemly. And watch, love will never seek after its own. And so love will not be prideful. Love will not always want to hold it for itself. But it's not easily provoked either, and it thinks no evil. Right? Love will do all of these things. And so one thing that you can do, and especially, and I'm talking to me as well, especially while you're single, not saying that married people aren't, aren't exempt from this, but especially while you're single, work on your phileo love, your brotherly love, but also work on the agape love, because at some point in your life, it's going to be tested. And so the phileo love, yes, we have that with our brethren, but we should have the agape love for them too. But then you'll have a special type of love for a special person in your life. And you have to be able to make maybe some tough decisions and you'll really have to show your true agape love. And so you see how love will always sacrifice, and you see how love will always wait, and you see how love will always be willing to let go, because love always wants what's absolutely best for the other person. And one more quick thing, going back to Abraham in Genesis chapter 22, when he was willing to let Isaac go, Abraham had enough faith that even after I let him go, the Lord will bring what I need in my life eventually. And I think that's a great message in Genesis chapter 22 for single people. Even if I have to let something go, even if I have to let someone go and they exceed past me and they do great things without me and they're doing great without me, I have to have enough faith, and you have to have enough faith, that even though you let that person go and they're excelling and you want them to because you love them, even though they may be excelling without you, you have to have enough faith individually in the Lord that he will put exactly who he needs to put in your life. It may be that person down the road, who knows, but it may be somebody entirely new. But you have to have enough faith, number one, to let the person that you love go. But then you also have to have enough faith in God that he'll put who he needs to back in. And that is hard. That is very difficult. No wonder Genesis 22:1 called this a test, because that is hard. That is very hard to do. But, in both of those cases, it also proves and it tests your love towards God. God, I may not understand right now why you want me to let this person go. I may not understand right now why you want me to be in this situation. But I do understand that even though I don't understand, I understand at some point you will put exactly what you want in my life when it's time and when it's ready. And so this is a great message for us as brethren to love one another, but this is also a good message as for, relationships and all that stuff with brethren in terms of, marriage, boyfriend, girlfriend relationships. It's a great message because it shows that love is not about you, right? It's about the other person. It's about the brother. It's about showing your fidelity towards God. And so love will always do these things, and love will always wait. Love will always do what's best. Love will always let go. But love, Genesis chapter 22, love will always trust that God will make the right choice, even if it's 7 years, but he'll make the right choice. And so my question to you and to myself, how much do you trust God? Thanks, guys.